This in contrast to the completion rate of collection of biometric data in the rest of the Philippines, where that is running at about 30%. So in fact, in terms of being able to ascertain that we will have a fair and peaceful election in ARM, in fact, the COMELEC has done more than it has done in other parts of the country to make sure that the conduct of those elections are fair and peaceful. The other reason that is being given for the synchronization is to save money. Now, as a matter of information, when this was first spoken about with me by Chairman Mello when he was still the chairman of COMELEC, the estimate was that there was going to be spent about 1.7 billion for the ARM election. But more importantly, Mr. President, if we are to take that argument to its logical conclusion, and seeing as the financial situation of the Philippines of great difficulty, and we always want to save money, then if we follow that same logic, then we just cancel all elections. Then we will save, I don't know, we will save 12, 13, 14 billion every 3 years. But of course, that is completely anathema to the entire system that we operate under. And number 6 finding is that the synchronization of election should be revisited only after the concrete evidence of electoral and political stability in the region are attained. If, in fact, the conduct of the elections in ARM are still particularly violent, are still particularly prone to abuse, then until that those political and electoral reforms can be shown to have been effective, and then only then should we think about synchronizing ARM elections with the rest of the country. Mr. President, let us go through this. Let us go through the stated reasons for the proposals to. I hope you have noticed that I do not use the word postpone in this in my committee report. I use the word cancel, and that is the reason being a postponement implies that a date is moved back. We are not moving back any date in this election. We are canceling the elections, and we are exchanging those elections and filling the elective positions with appointments for the president. Therefore, we are not postponing the elections. We are canceling them. Mr. President, one of the reasons stated for the subject proposals here today is that of reform in ARM. If there is one area of complete agreement amongst all officials, stakeholders, entities, and even private individuals that the committee has consulted with on this matter, that consensus would be that ARM as an organization is indeed in need of structural and fundamental reform. What is less clear, however, is how these proposals to cancel election and to appoint OICs will lead to that reform. The question that the committee asked all those who came before us was this: what is the mechanism that will take us from the act of canceling elections and appointing OICs to result in reform, and how will that take place? The committee, therefore, is not convinced that canceling elections and appointing OICs is necessary to institute those necessary reforms. All the proposals for reform that have been heard are achievable without interfering with the electoral process. I would even venture to say that a group of elected officials with a fresh mandate from the people would have the moral ascendancy and the imprimatur of the people, and thus be in a better position and be more effective in instituting reforms. As to the synchronization of ARM elections with national elections, we are reminded that the framers of RA 9057 specifically desynchronized ARM elections because of the recognition of the particularly difficult and heated nature of the conduct of elections in ARM. There have been in the past many instances of cheating, abuse, and violence in the electoral process in ARM. So it is with this understanding that the committee recommends that until concrete evidence and objective indications of political and electoral reform can be shown, that we conduct separate ARMM elections to allow government to focus all its possible resources and energies to the peaceful conduct of these elections. Mr. President, I have touched upon the legal arguments that have arisen on both sides of the issue of the cancellation of ARMM elections, and because the proposed bills are seen by many, myself included, to remove the guarantees of ARMM autonomy enshrined not only in Republic Act 9054, the Organic Act for the Autonomous Region Muslim Mindanao, but also mandated in the Constitution. Mr. President, many of us here still remember the fighting in Mindanao in the 70s and the 80s at the height of the secessionist movement in Muslim Mindanao. That movement tore at the very fabric of our republic. And there was a period when the separation of certain areas of Muslim Mindanao from the Republic of the Philippines seemed an imminent possibility. It was with this background that negotiations were undertaken to bring peace to the region and to find answers to the causes that brought about this war and turmoil in the South. A central tenet to all the peace agreements that have been adopted in the intervening years is the necessary recognition of the cultural, historical, religious, and even legal differences between Christian and Muslim communities. These differences were deemed to require that these Muslim communities must be governed and administered by officials and entities that would incorporate the aforementioned differences in culture, history, religion, and law in its governance. In other words, Mr. President, an essential element for peace was recognition by central government of the autonomy of Muslim Mindanao. That is why, Mr. President, these guarantees of autonomy were enshrined in law. This was done to codify the manner in which government acts and helps operationalize the autonomy of Muslim Mindanao, a requirement for true and lasting peace. So, legal argument aside, these proposals to cancel the election, appoint OICs in ARMM, strikes at the very heart of that autonomy, so hard fought by our Muslim brothers and so hard won by all those injured and killed on both sides of the conflict. These proposals before us today are not amendments to our existing law. And to toss aside that autonomy would be a sea change in national policy. To ignore the guarantees of Muslim Mindanao's autonomy would be nothing less than a repudiation of the social contract that we as a society have made with the Muslim communities in Mindanao. Mr. President, we have been witness in the past few months to what has come to be known as the Arab Spring, where hundreds of thousands of Arab citizens have risen up in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya, Syria, Bahrain, even Morocco. They have sacrificed life and limb to gain their right to suffrage and self-determination. Filipino Muslims have already gained the exercise of their rights to suffrage and self-determination. They have already achieved, at least partially, their autonomy. We must not reverse that process. We must not accompany the light of the Arab Spring of 2011 with the darkness of a cold winter for ARMM. Thank you, Mr. President.